Hi, it's Janine Koswara here with a tutorial on making distressed layers on your layout. Now firstly I've used some Tim Holtz Distress ink, and I've just inked up my tool, and then holding very firmly on the mask I go around in a circular motion. And the reason I go around in a circular motion with the distress tool is just to help prevent too many stark lines if you were doing it just straight. And you just keep holding the mask in place with your fingers. You hold it fairly firmly close to the area that you're masking at that point. If it comes away, that's not a big deal. You just move it back into place because you can see where it goes underneath, and keep going with it right the way around. It's really not difficult to do, and it's lots of fun. The effect's really great. So you can see I just keep going with my masking right the way around. Make sure you get into all the small cracks and grooves within your mask, and you have to press reasonably firmly when you're going into those areas because that's going to give you a much more effective mask effect. Now just going on and trimming down some paper and just cutting it down to size with your trimmer, and then I'm going to just ink it up. My favourite distress ink here is Walnut Stain, and I give it a nice little ink around the edges. Now I often ink before I distress because I like to bring back some white. And using the new ergonomic tools by Ingvild Bolme, I've just gone around with a normal distressing tool, and then now I'm going into it more with the rasp action of the tool. Here you can see I don't actually want this image on my paper, so I'm using the sharp little rasp on the end and just scratching away a lot of the surface of that image. Once I've scratched that away, then I'm inking around, and then I can start distressing the main edges again. And again, I'm just breaking the surface with the normal sort of distressing tool on the edge, and that sort of breaks the surface, but then I can actually go back over it with one of the rougher edges. Now the trick with it is you just sort of press it in as you're going, and you can see it's very hard. I'm using the edge of the mat because it's designed specifically for this, so you're not rasping off the actual grid lines, but unfortunately it means that you can't see as much of what I'm doing on this video. And I always wondered how you got those beautiful distressed, really heavily distressed edges, and this tool makes it super easy. Pressing it forward and down into, on the mat into the paper, and it really pushes back and curls back the paper edge as you're doing it, which is really great. And then it's just basically the construction of the layout. So I'm just forming up my layers and popping them on one after the other just to see how I like it. Now you can see the great effect you get when you use the distress tool on this corrugated card. It really roughs up those edges and adds heaps of texture and everything to this card, and I really love the effect it had with this just because of the multi-layers within the actual corrugated card. It gave a much rougher effect on the edges, and it was great. And just checking placement. I decided that it was a little bit too long, so I just trimmed it down and then went back and just rasped on the edges again. And you can just see how much you can curl it up, and it's super easy to do. Obviously I've sped this up a lot just to make it a bit quicker because it takes quite a while for the construction of my layouts. And I use a lot of the distress ink. Now I'm just glimmer misting up some limited edition roses, and I've used one of the Tattered Angels chalkboard glimmer mists. I love the chalkboard because it gives a really wonderful saturated colour when you use it, and this one was Cherry Cola, I think, the colour. Now just to stick down, I tend to keep it in place and use a bit of glue underneath, try and take the top layers off in one hit, and then just sort of stick the underneath layers where they are, and that way I ensure that it's closer going back where I want it. If I take it all away and try and put it back one by one, it can be a little bit difficult when you've got lots and lots of layers involved. So as you can see, I've held it down in place and then just used my Helmer 450 just to go around and stick down all the elements. And even the flowers that I know are on those underneath layers, I'll do at this point as well. And then bring back the layers. I bring them all back to get perspective on it before taking away another set and leaving myself just with one. Now I've stitched around this, and I'm actually using on the side of a tool, there's a little lip on it, and that's really good just for lifting up after you're sewing on an edge, whereas I previously used my fingernails and it can actually kind of hurt the fingernails a bit. It just means I can use the tool instead. And again, just replacing the layers before sticking down the next bit and sewing it, and again just going around with that tool to lift those edges back up. And it just adds in more dimension when you lift them back up again. Now I'm just using the fine aspect of the rasp tool just to go on the bit of chipboard there and just rough it up slightly. And I really love using lots of the distress ink around my edges of my pages. It just gives it a lot more dimension and interest, and you just add a little bit more depth of colour in those areas as well. And as you can see, each time I just bring back the layers and rearrange them, just checking the placement. And it's just the way I can recreate when I'm sticking down, because I always design with it all not stuck to start with, and by putting the layers back down again all at once and just taking a few off at a time and leaving one layer there, I'm able to recreate it that way. I'm just fussed around with the flowers a little bit, working out their placement. And see, just took those layers off before sticking down the envelope, which is actually going to act as a spot for hidden journaling later on. Now, to distress your photo, I've actually used the end part of the tool and I've just rubbed it all on the edges, and it actually just takes off the top coating on your photo. This is one that's printed at a photo lab, but it'll work with any photo. It just takes away the colour and coating, gives a gorgeous, really shabby chic distressed edge, brings back more white around it, and acts as a bit of a frame, distressed sort of frame to the photo. You can just see how, I've brought back those white edges in the photos there. Now I always start with my largest flowers and work down in size with my elements from that. I just find that's the best way to get a beautiful cluster, and then you can add smaller ones later on into bits, areas of it that you want to fill out a little bit more. But I find that's the best way to, add flowers, is just start with your largest ones and then work down in size. And again with lettering, I usually start sticking down with extra glue on it. I find the self-adhesive is fine for, if you don't mind and it's going to stay within a layout, but since a lot of mine don't end up in layouts and they end up on walls or on display, I tend to like to add extra adhesive to them when I'm sticking them down. And finally, I just want to make a little not clasp, but like a little spot in the middle of my envelope, just to make it more obvious that it's something that can be lifted up. So I've punched a circle and then popped a hole, put an eyelet in, and then I'll just pop that up with foam mount tape, and that just gives a little opening spot for it that's quite visible. And I've just inked around the edges of that bit as well.